Hi there, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and today I have a no-line coloring card with a masked and stenciled background. We're using the Bone-a-fide birthday stamp set from Simon Says Stamp and creating this colorful background that perfectly matches the design. We're going to start with some no-line coloring using the Bone-a-fide birthday image stamped with the Ink on 3 Fade Out No Line Coloring Detail ink on Bristol Smooth cardstock. Bristol Smooth cardstock is my preferred cardstock for Zig Clean Color Real Brush Marker coloring. I have not stamped this image before and it has a lot of surface area, so I stamped it more than once to get a nice dark image. The great thing about this Ink on 3 Fade Out ink is that it's going to stay crisp long enough for you to color in the image. I wouldn't leave it overnight, but it does stay visible and easy to see while you're coloring it, but it will eventually fade out, leaving you with a beautiful no-line look that we all love. I'm going to start at the top of the image and work my way down using Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I like to lay the dark color down first and blend it out with a lighter color. For the ears on the dog, I'm using mid-brown and then blending it with beige ink. We're going to do the ears and the face of the dog, and then we will transition to the birthday hat and gradually work our way from the top of the image down. One of the things I love most about this Fade Out ink is I'm going to be able to color over the nose and other facial detail with my beige marker and still be able to see those areas well enough to trace over them with my darker marker once this ink has dried. I really like to make sure that my base has already dried, in this case the beige ink, before I come back and color over the nose with the mid-brown marker. You could also opt to color this in with a black glaze marker or other black detail pen if you wanted to. I did trace around the eyes, but I probably wouldn't have had to, since I'm going to go back in with a black glaze or gel pen, to color those in and then finish with a white pen for the highlights. You can still see the nose and the eyebrows and even all of the other facial detail easily enough to trace over that with your markers. I did add a little pink to the cheeks, and I wasn't super happy. I thought it was a little too dark, so I did go back over with my beige marker to blend it out a little bit more. We're going to be going with rainbow color today, one of my favorites. This is more of a pastel rainbow, so you'll be seeing a lot of pinks with sugared almond pink and peach pink, orangey yellows with bright yellow and yellow, limey greens with light green and yellow green, some aqua with turquoise green and green shadow, and even some purples with light violet and pale violet, and then of course a little blue with blue and light blue. I tried to get all of the colors represented in the birthday hat, and then those colors will repeat throughout the rest of the design in the candles, the flames on the candles, the cake plate, all of the things. We're going to use a little pink haze for the inside of the dog's ear. And then of course finish here with the top of the hat with blue and light blue. The flames on all of the candles is colored with bright yellow and yellow. The nose has dried enough, so I'm going to go ahead and go back in with my mid-brown marker and color that area in. Throughout the design, there are splatters of frosting, including the bit here on the ear. There's some on the nose, there's some on the bone, the paw, and then down on the cake plate. I love that this repeats throughout the whole design. I decided early on I wanted the frosting on my cake to be a combination of peach pink and sugared almond pink for the pink cake, or pink frosting, on a vanilla or white cake base. I went ahead and went in with my black glaze pen and added detail to the eyes, and while that's drying I can keep coloring and I can come back in a little bit with a white detail pen. I want the bone to blend in with the design but still appear white. I traced the image with a beige marker and blended it out with light beige. The tongue hanging out is carmine red and light carmine. Let's color in the rest of the body. I'm tracing the rest of the dog's design with mid-brown. And then there's some little saliva splatters from the dog's tongue that I traced with blue and blended out with light blue before going back in and finishing blending out the dog's body with the beige marker. We're going to color in the flames then for the first tier of cake with bright yellow and trace the entire frosting area with peach pink. There's those white highlights for the eyes. I like to get the big surface areas colored as I'm going, especially as it really starts making the image come to life. Once we get this first layer of cake colored in, I really think that the image starts to take shape and you can see what it's going to be when it's all finished. I think this is one of the most exciting things about no line coloring. I went ahead and did the rest of the flames for the candles with bright yellow and yellow so that I could make sure and avoid those as I'm filling in the frosting surface area with sugared almond pink. We're going to trace that first layer of cake then with our beige, concentrating the color down especially near the base, but also a little up near the top. We'll blend out this color with our light beige marker, pulling the darker color up and the darker color down to meet. One of the things I like the most is that the beige marker was used as the lightest color in the dog when combined with mid-brown. In this case, it's much lighter because I've combined it with light beige and it gives a completely different look. The candles here are light violet and pale violet with light green and yellow green. We're going to go ahead and color in that last layer of cake, the bottom layer of cake, starting with our frosting again, tracing that out with peach pink and filling in with sugared almond pink. Being careful to trace around all of those candles. As we get to the bottom of the image, there's a lot less small detail. There's still a lot of curves, especially with the frosting, but there's not quite as much to go around, especially as you see I'm starting to color in the cake layer, and I'm just avoiding the frosting splatters near the cake plate, but otherwise the surface area is going to be super quick and easy to color. I laid down quite a bit more color down near the base, and I'll blend that out with my light beige marker, pulling again the color up and pulling it down to meet to fill that in. And as I finish up the cake, you can really see how cute this design is. I love this image. I think it's so much fun and fantastic for a dog lover's birthday. Let's fill in our candles. I chose to use colors that I've used throughout the design, with the exception, since there's a lot of pink in this with the pink frosting, I didn't do any pink candles and instead did a red candle, and I didn't do any orange-yellow candles since we have the orange-yellow flames on all of the candles. So we've got blues, aquas, greens, purples, and red. There's a few additional frosting splatters on our cake plate, traced with peach pink and and then filled in with sugared almond pink. Our candle down here, we'll just do a green candle with light green and yellow green. And our cake plate, we're going to finish with aquas with turquoise green and green shadow. This works out really well because the bottom part of our rainbow background, where the cake plate is going to sit, is peacock feathers and cracked pistachio. Now that we have our image all colored in, it's time to create a mask and then do some stenciling. I'm going to tape my image to my work surface so it doesn't shift while I'm doing some stenciling work. I'm taping the stencil over my project, but I need to make sure I add my mask that I stamped and fussy cut out first. So I'll just flip this over here, remove the backing paper from my mask, and pop this in place. I stamped this with a light gray dye ink on the Simon Says Stamp masking paper, and then I'm replacing the stencil and I'm starting to stencil in the areas. Most of the areas, in fact everything but the orange area at the very top of my card, is 5 rays. The orange area is 4. This is to keep it very consistent, and I want to do whatever I'm doing on the left side, I want to be repeated on the right. And I want the bottom to be centered as well. And this was the easiest way I found to do that. I'm adding color to each section in rainbow order to match the colors I've used when coloring in the image. So picked raspberry, spiced marmalade, squeezed lemonade, twisted citron. We'll flip over to the other side and do a little wilted violet. And then we'll finish with the bottom sections using peacock feathers and cracked pistachio. This is going to leave us with colorful rays with white in between all of those. You could leave it like that if you wanted to, or you can do what I'm going to do, and that is carefully go over each section. I'm going to mask it off so that there isn't any transition of color really. It's going to keep the color in each area. And I'm going to go over each of these areas with my ink blending tools without re-inking them. So whatever ink is on there from the stenciling is just what I'm going to go ahead and use to add additional color to those sections. You still see the Radiating Rays, My Favorite Things stencil design, but it's going to be a little more muted maybe, and the whole section is going to have color instead of any white. I really wanted to avoid a white background and instead have this be very colorful. We'll fill in the rest of these color sections, and then we're going to add some stamping to the background to fill in all of that kind of open, empty white, I say white space, but it's colorful space up at the top. When we remove the stencil, the magic of the design just comes to life. I love how this looks. We're going to trim our background down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. We're also going to take the woof sentiment from the Bone-a-fide birthday stamp set and the confetti image and stamp this throughout the background using the same colors of distress ink that we used for our stenciling. This is going to give a tone-on-tone effect and add instant interest to our background. We'll be stamping the sentiment, cake, did someone say cake, below the cake plate here in just a little bit. So I'm going to avoid using any confetti or woof sentiments in that area since I'm going to be using a large sentiment there. I opted to do all of my stamping in the background of the card with the same colors that I used throughout instead of pulling in any black ink or even white embossing. I really wanted everything to tie together perfectly. The only difference, instead of the squeezed lemonade distress ink, for the confetti, it didn't show up that great, so I did use a yellow dye ink from my stash to stamp those instead of the distress ink, and it showed up much better. I've used Spiced Marmalade Distress ink for the sentiment over the yellow section as well, because I knew if I used yellow, you wouldn't be able to read it. The sentiment is stamped with Peacock Feathers Distress ink. I'm using the Misty so that I can stamp the image more than once. Distress ink does not stamp like dye inks do, and so sometimes you need to stamp it more than once to get a much crisper, better impression. Same goes for the paw prints that I'm going to stamp to the right of the sentiment, also from the Bone-a-fide birthday stamp set. I'm stamping these with Cracked Pistachio ink over the Cracked Pistachio stenciled and inked section of our rainbow. I decided to add just a couple more confetti and sentiment images and sentiments to the top of our scene. There is our background. Next, I'm going to take a white top fold card base, and to continue with the look and theme of our card, we're going to stamp another sentiment from the stamp set inside our card that reads, "I baked your favorite cake, ... It was Bone-a-fide delicious. Oops." I think that's so clever, cute, and fun. I stamped that with the Picked Raspberry Distress ink so that the inside of the card perfectly matches the front. We're even going to add a paw print to the inside above this, stamped with the Spiced Marmalade ink. So even the sentiment inside the card is bright and colorful. We can go ahead and fold our card in half, add some nice strong adhesive to the front, and pop our card panel in place. For finishing details, we're going to take Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard and add some sparkly flames to each of the flames on the candles. When this dries, it's going to give a sparkly, clear finish, especially when tipped in the light, which is perfect for the flames. We're going to add glossy accents to the nose on the dog. One of my favorite finishing touches always on critters is a shiny, glossy, raised nose. And then we're going to take some Pretty Pink Posh jewels and do a tone-on-tone look all the way around our Radiating Rays background. This is going to help fill in areas where the woof sentiment and the confetti don't fill it in. Plus, it adds some nice sparkle throughout the rest of the card. I picked colors of jewels that matched the ink colors as close as possible. I'm using a little Gina K Connect glue and the Crystal Katana to pick them up and put them in place right where I want them to go. This helps keep your fingers out of the way and helps you get perfect placement every time. Finally, we'll take a couple more and finish off this little section down at the bottom, and then we will take our glossy accents again and draw over those paw prints so that they have a glossy raised finish when they're dry as well. It draws your eye into those paw prints just a little bit more than leaving them flat. I'll take my white pen when the nose on the dog is all dry and draw in the highlight on the nose. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this bright and colorful Bone-a-fide birthday no-line coloring card featuring the Simon Says Stamp Bone-a-fide birthday stamp set. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Simon Says stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.